engage Buddhism. We are the earliest engaged Buddhists, and there are engaged Buddhists. The question, with the ritual, so the closest example I will give you would be how you can embrace the aspects of retaining your essence of what you want to do would be liberation theology in Catholics. So they celebrate Christmas, everything, but they also very social justice focused. And some of the Christians in India are very active about that part, where of course they celebrate Christmas, Easter, all those things. Plus, it's also like where we are going with this. What is this idea of love? Creating a language. We can Ambedkar Jayanti could be our social justice day, right? It could be our social justice day. So we should not forget Ambedkar signals how we think about both. How we think about Buddhism and social change. Not people have done that at the time. In fact, when Islam came, traditional Buddhists didn't like the book. From Sri Lanka, they questioned it, if I remember right. So he was afraid of it. So I think what I'm saying is, in some sense, you may have to do both. It's a very globalized thing. So celebrating those things is important. Also, retaining the justice part, what it means, right? Why we are doing this sort of thing. So liberation theologists do a very good job in Latin America. They're very good in India, Tamil Nadu definitely I know. So they are doing this. So I think we need to have both the torch. One torch is the celebratory part, other torch is the Ambedkar torch. I think we have to do both. It's a lot of work for us, but it is important and worth doing it. So that's the really engaged with this part. It doesn't mean we need to be completely not to be dry and uninterested in these issues, because rituals sometimes are important to bring communities together, right? So Japan is also very interesting how the rituals the people only go to Buddhist temple during either wedding or rituals. These are times. But there's also other celebrations people participate. But they secularize those celebrations. Yeah. So one thing Ambedkarites can take a lead is how to secularize these celebrations. So Ambedkar Jayanti could be our social justice, whatever. We acknowledge our right to talk about differences, our reaffirm our commitment to making an egalitarian society. That's what he wants us to do. At least that's my understanding. So I think we don't have to give up on the rituals, but we don't have to forget this is what our vision, which is important.
I think that secularism part is very much important.
Well, so I think part of the challenge also is that the words that we use to organize what we're seeing in the world themselves are a little slanted and they're limited. They don't quite capture the complexity of what's happening in the world. So even the word secularism is a very loaded term.
It means very different in India and here.
Yes, it means very different things depending on where we are. But also, I think communities of the Indian inclusive of many different religions, that's very different than how you do it here versus how you do it in France versus how you do it in Japan. So there's that. The thing that I found, especially, I was very surprised when I spent time in the UK back people in Wolverhampton and in London, and so especially the Punjabis, I just was not so familiar with them. And so learning that there was a sizable Ambedkarite community in the UK and that it happened, actually growing up in the UK, came as a shock to me. I was not familiar with that. And talking with them too, I found that there was a very different, if I can say, sort of cultural attitude, and I think that's kind of what you might be referring to, where I see, and I hope that I'm not going to get myself in trouble here. I'm just reflecting, this is my observations, maybe they're wrong. I didn't see quite the same sense of maybe pride and confidence in a lot of the Punjabi communities that I spoke with that I saw in the Maharashtrian communities, especially the Maharashtrians coming from Nagpur. I think Nagpur is kind of extraordinary there, and maybe you can disagree with me. I think there's a difference between Ambedkar out of that Nagpur area and then in other parts of Maharashtra. There's just sort of a level of confidence and self-assurance that seems a little bit more natural, probably because of the numbers and the history in there. But in any case, with the Punjabis, one thing that they pointed out was that in the UK, if they're Punjabi, everybody assumes if you're Punjabi, therefore you're Sikh. And like Maharashtra, and so there's the distinction that the Ambedkarite Buddhists would say they're not Sikh, but then with the Ravidasis, they would say also that the Ravidasis are very anti-caste and they're very politically active. In fact, I think even in North America, the Ravidasis have been some of the most politically active in terms of moving this legislation along. And they're not Buddhist. A lot of them, at least that I've spoken to, inherit Dr. Ambedkar, revere him in many ways, but don't become Buddhist. And so the Buddhists that I spoke with in the UK sometimes said that the Ravidasis would look to them and say, how come you have left our father? How come you abandoned our father? Meaning, how come you abandoned Ravidas? And so there was almost a sense of betrayal there, that by becoming Buddhist, they had left behind some of their culture, or left behind some of their identity that for the Ravidasis was not negotiable. And the Maharashtrians, I don't think, have to deal with that. Like, there's like, I don't know, leaving behind Soka Mela or something, that doesn't kind of come up in the same way in Maharashtra as it does for the Ravidasis. And so religious identity can become a barrier to working together. And that's one of the big things I'm just very interested to see how people manage this. Because I've spoken with some Ambedkarite Buddhists who say that converting to Buddhism is the natural and necessary endpoint of Dr. Ambedkar's project. There are lots of Ambedkarites who have not converted to Buddhism. And when I was interviewing people in Dubai, the group that I actually talked with there would say maybe only half of them were Buddhist, maybe 2/3 were Buddhist, but there were a lot of people who were firmly committed to something else. And so finding that way of, either we call it like an Indian-style secularism, or finding a way to like hold on to a religious identity, but not to make it something that is a barrier to working with people who don't share that particular piece of the identity, but who do share other commitments, that's the real challenge. And there I think that might reflect back to, especially the Punjabi community, of like how they manage like the Ambedkarite Buddhist Ravidasi relationship, and festivals and rituals. I don't know exactly how people here all see this, but at least growing up in the US, there's this very common idea that religion is about beliefs and ethics. And I think actually Dr. Ambedkar, to a large extent, he kind of reflected that based on his own reading and his own thinking. I think that undervalues the role that ritual and especially embodiment plays. And so that's why I think you have in a lot of traditions, you can say empty rituals, but I think there's an aspect of rituals and festivals that engages people's bodies that just sort of simply having ideas about the world doesn't do. And that's why like, festivals and participating and like community relationships, the festival, we can say maybe it's slipping back as you did. I think a lot of it though is still also participation. How do we participate and hold on to community bonds? Do we have to sever those if we become members of a different religious group? Or are there ways to still somehow hold that together? That I think is more, to my mind, more at the center of what people are, how they're negotiating that. We could say it's slipping back. I'm not sure that's more of an evaluative way of looking at it. I'm not sure I would characterize it as that, but more of like people wanting to maintain their social bonds. So, yeah.
I also like to add, think with community and for example, Quakers and Unitarians, very strong social justice focus group as Protestant Christians. And they shared space. They also migrated to the US from UK for they were persecuted, right? So in a way, we can also find alliances like that, so that we can reach out. They also, it's our responsibility to educate them about Ambedkar. Many people don't know this is why he did it. So that kind of connection with Jesuits, even Catholics who are the liberation theologians, Unitarians, Quakers, just name a few. involving them in some of the events. Also, partly we are building a social justice foundation with solidarity in a way. So we're also celebrating the unique aspects of how we do this. That's important. So I think it will be important for us. The next step is to connect to like-minded, value-based organizations, and how to have some difficult conversations like Ravidas is, have you left us? Have you forgotten us? Things like that. I think it's an important question for us to sit with them and discuss and build the solidarity. That's how solidarity movement we can build.
Yeah, thanks for telling that thing. Actually, we are actually working like that. So we are associated with the Muslim community also. We invite them in our events, and they participate there. We also go there, and this is the like-mindedness, how we are actually fighting for the justice, the equality, the same message we are passing to them, and they are also passing it to us.
And I think Anna is also, I want to acknowledge, Anna is also very actively collaborating with Priya Ambedkar Study Circle. We do a lot of events together over the years, and it's very, it brings so much joy for me, because when I came to this US 36 years ago, we were all minorities. I can't even bring a non-vegetarian food for a potluck in those days. There were only 5% non-Brahmins were in any school. So it's really, I can't tell you how happy to see these people here. It's important.
That's a good point, I think. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, sure.
My name is Mahendra. I'm coming from Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you, Dr. Keune and Mahalingam, sir. I have a quick question for Dr. Keune that we talked more about the observations and your studies around the migrations of Ambedkar philosophy and Buddhism along with it to different countries. You also mentioned the problem that you might have seen in the third generation. Right now we are kind of first or second generation here, and if we foresee that problem of third generation happening around us, right? Do we have any kind of historical testimonies where we can refer to and say, hey, these were the things that were implemented by the first and second generations, and they were able to kind of carry on the legacy of whatever religious practices or the faith they carried was inherited in them, and that kind of continued for the longer duration. So if you have any kind of thoughts or any kind of research or any kind of references to come back, that would be really good.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot in the future. Off the top of my head, I don't have another sort of reference to say, oh, well, you should definitely look to this group over there. My voice coming across still? Okay. Yes, I don't have an immediate reference to say definitely pay attention to that group. They provide a great model. What I would say though is that just having a sensitivity to how the role of Buddhism and Dr. Ambedkar, what that means for somebody who grows up in a culture where they have a minority status that's configured for a very different reason, on the basis of ethnicity rather than of caste and religion. It necessarily shapes people differently. And I'm sure that all of you are negotiating and all of you are figuring out how do you maintain your relationships to your families in India. Because I assume that most of you still have extended family in India, people of some sort. And I also, as I've spoken with a lot of Ambedkarites, a number of them have actually said that they feel very unsure and even a little bit ashamed that they feel they haven't been doing enough for helping people coming from backgrounds they know are very difficult, and now they're more financially stable and like in North America, and they're not sure what to do. And so figuring out that relationship is going to be a challenge. But in terms of the generations going forward, I think it's important to recognize Dr. Ambedkar's version and the nature of Buddhism as social democracy, and that is sort of distinctive from the other kinds of Buddhism that have centuries of history behind them. For the Ambedkarite Buddhist community going forward, already as was mentioned, Dr. Ambedkar died only 7 weeks after he converted. So this is very much an unfinished project. This is rather different than, we could say, say Jewish Americans who have, say, 2,000 years of history plus. And then they come to a different place and then they establish their community. I don't think that's a comparable community to look at, because what it even means for Ambedkarites to be Buddhist is it's an ongoing project. That's something that you all, if Buddhism is important to you, that's something that you all are still kind of figuring out. And we can certainly look back to Dr. Ambedkar and what he wrote as guideposts, but it is an unfinished project. And that means that people will continue to be growing and developing and having to develop as they move into different contexts. So on some level, I think, I don't want to say it's completely unprecedented, but it's wise to look to other communities. There are some things that are rather unique about the Ambedkarites that I'm not sure there is anything that's entirely comparable. So it's a really good question. I'm glad you're thinking about that, and that you bring this up publicly. I'll be thinking about it more in the future too. Thank you.
Yes, I agree that it is an ongoing project, and we have to carry that thing. One more question. I think somebody else.
बनते जी को एक क्वेश्चन.
Good morning. Two great scholars today here. A lot of information, a lot of knowledge we are getting. We are so much benefiting in this very moment. I have a question that about the mind. 7 billion human beings in this planet Earth today. 7 billion human mind. Every being has an individual mind. And every we know that, right? And mind control. So how the mind exists and how to came to the manifestation. And I have a deep question about how it is calm and here and disappear. And it takes the great impact the mind. And Buddha said that the mind is the forerunner of action and mind is the architect. And then the mind actually how it is and disappear. And so I did question about that and appear and disappear. So how I want to know that the difficult
I think it's very important. Thank you for your question. I think I'm going to borrow another tale, a Buddha story, to answer your question. The Buddha was walking with his disciples. There was a rock. So he asked his students, and it's a big rock. It's so big boulder. So his response was, if it is a big boulder only when you try to push it. So when you people sit and meditate, I don't know, some of you practice meditation, the first thing you notice is, once you close your eyes, my students become their own filmmakers. There's a lot of movies going on in their head, scripts. You're editing, you are the main hero, you're the script writer. Then you realize, oh, because I'm meditating, you come back to your breath. So the idea is, don't wrestle, don't push the boulder, just notice the boulder. If you are just noticing it, you are not pushing it, you are not feeling the pain. So it's not a big boulder, you just notice it. So the idea is, all the thoughts coming in the practice is how do you think about this question, right? This is hard for young people because a lot of things are going on. So that is really one way, the way psychologists are trying to do is to look at the mind wandering, how do we experimentally we study it. In about 10 years ago, we used to have the electrodes, when they are wandering, they used to raise their hand. So if our mind is wandering, they can raise the hand, we notice it. Now we can actually tell exactly what neurologically where you are. Are you really meditating or wandering? So we can actually show that. So it really helps people to really think. For example, monks like yourself with a long meditation experience have a very different meditative state the moment you sit for meditation compared to new people. Right? So these things help them to understand how long it takes to cultivate this. So how to, the famous joke I always, sometimes students in my class tell me, I ask them why you're taking the class. I'm not joking. Some students write, I want to be enlightened by the end of the semester. I said, wow, we're very little. He said, okay, so if I really 8 hours a day, maybe if I practice 16 hours a day, how long? It will be 2.5 years. So the teacher said, no, it will take 10 years for you to be enlightened. So don't try too hard, So it's just how to be gentle. It's very important how to be gentle. Some very important teachers of meditation very educated I received. They talk about how to, the regular state is a joyous state. How we have to really be this. Chang Min, who developed this Search Yourself, the Google program for mindfulness, is a Korean Buddhist scholar. And he talks about how being just our regular state is a joyful state. Think about that. How to really be in the moment. And that's always a challenge. So it's really how to bring students back to this. So that's what it is. Psychology is also trying to help them. We are all not fully there, but we are trying.
The question about mind, I think one thing that is also rather distinctive that I want people to be aware of is this. I think genuinely, in the last 15 years, as I've watched students change, as I've watched myself change, dealing with smartphones, social media, we're thinking about mind. Some of our mind now is somewhere else, in some cloud server somewhere else. People, especially as you get generative AI and ChatGPT, so now I would imagine Ram would probably agree, like this year, teaching has been substantially different than teaching in any other year, because we know that our students are simply typing things into ChatGPT and kind of bringing stuff back and putting on the assignments. And they're not thinking very critically about what is actually going on there. And so there's sort of a reliability that you can find proper information with this thing. So as you're talking about, say, the boulder and pushing the boulder, I think the boulder is already being pushed. Google is pushing it, Facebook is pushing it, Meta is pushing it. It's being pushed out there. And these are the boulders, the minds that we have, and we're not, I think, fully cognizant of how these media forces are pushing us around. It's now just part of the lives that we live. And I see it especially in my students, that as they've changed over the past 12 years that I've been teaching, there has been a change. And I have a lot of compassion for students now, especially if they've grown up around social media and been a part of like having an online personality that once they have this, say, Facebook post or Instagram or TikTok, whatever, that this seems to open up so many possibilities for anonymous people or even classmates who hide like behind an anonymous username or something, do real psychological damage to each other. This feels to me like, physically it might not be exactly a more dangerous time, but psychologically this feels like a very, very dangerous time to be a young person. I have a lot of sympathy for how difficult that must be. And I think a lot of it has to do with mind and what we just assume, the way that we're affected by technology is a little out of control. And yeah, mindfulness is a good thing to have to hopefully pull us out of some of these, I would say, toxic relationships we have with technology that are simply the fault. I'm thinking of myself here, not just other people.
Is it the mind is ego or the mind is self?
The mind is ego or the mind is self? I think, well, for a lot of people, just by default, if they're thinking about, say, how somebody responds to them on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or social media, and they see some negative feedback, they see some negative comments, or people making fun of them or something, I'm especially draw back and be able to have that distance, as you were talking about, which is what you recognize like is there. I don't think that people have that ability very easily. That's hard to achieve, especially for young people, and then it just has a very damaging effect.
Yeah, I think for my mindfulness class, they cannot use cell phones. It's very hard for them to do that in the beginning. And we also have a contemplative practice space. So when they come and work there, they have to leave their cell phones, everything outside. We have a special assistant to keep them so that they can work without this. So it's really important. It's a very long struggle for us. We have to start something.
Yes, the power of actually like thinking actually goes away with this social media and this small device. So I think we have one more question over here coming up.
Last question.
Jacqueline,
Running out of time.
thanks for this informative session. I love psychology, it's one of my favorite subjects. I have a question for Jon Keune. My question is, you studied about Buddhism in various countries. Where do you see women in Buddhism? Do you see any gender disparities? And what is your point of view? And what is the other women's point of view on Buddhism? And I have a question for Professor Mahalingam. How do you cultivate mindfulness in the 3 generations where your first slide showed that we need to show the compassion, and the compassion between the 3 generations, like I feel myself in the middle. I'm dealing with a teenager, and the other one is parents are older. How do you cultivate that mindfulness and fill those gaps to 3 different mindsets? One is there, one is myself, and one is other. That's my question. Thank you.
So, fantastic questions. Women in Buddhism, I'm teaching a class right now on Buddhism in South Asia, and so we are actually going to reach our final week next week. And this past week, throughout the entire course, there has been a challenge that throughout most of Buddhist history in South Asia, women have largely not been very present in the historical records, or we have to like very proactively go out and sort of find them, because otherwise what has been represented has been by and large myth. For Dr. Ambedkar, and from what I've also seen of interviewing Ambedkarite families around the world, it has been really quite uplifting to see how active the women have been, and how highly educated the women have been. I'm sure there are still plenty of challenges around it, so not to diminish that at all. And in fact, I'd strongly recommend, it's unfortunate that Professor Pike couldn't join us today, because that's something that she works on a lot. So if you have a chance to go and look at her scholarship, that would be fantastic. One thing that is rather interesting, though, is a group called Sakyavita. Have you heard of this group? So I attended their conference. I happened to be in Korea last summer, and so I attended the conference there, and there were some 5,000 Buddhist women. I think I was probably maybe one of 50 men in this conference of 5,000 Buddhist women, which was kind of an interesting experience. But they're very active, and this is international. Ambedkarites there was one Ambedkarite speaker on the program that ended up, she wasn't there for the session, so I didn't get to, that got canceled. I don't know how much Ambedkarites have been communicating with Sakyavita at all, but this is a global movement, and they are quite active. Their main emphasis really is, though, bringing together Buddhists from especially more majority Buddhist countries. So there's a lot of other dynamics that are not really related to Ambedkarites. But women are extremely present. And for all of the time I've spent in Taiwan, too, women are extremely present in Buddhist traditions there. In fact, some of them, Tsuchi is led by women, and majority women, so this is rather extraordinary. There are some contemporary examples to be looking at. But yeah, I think from what I've seen, Ambedkarite women have been probably more on the cutting edge of being active and included and even to some extent being leaders in a way that a lot of other communities have not been quite so much. And maybe part of that is because this is a relatively new movement, and that means the weight of tradition is not quite as heavy. Whereas, like, say, in Sri Lanka, there is a lot more weight and a lot more people who would say, well, if the orders of nuns died out 1,000 years ago, that's just the way it is, and we can't change because it's been this way for the past 1,000 years. Ambedkarite people don't have to deal with that regardless. So, with just a few thoughts. I don't know if any of that is relevant or helpful, but I'll pass it on.
Thanks for the question, and it's always a challenge as psychologists to think about. When you think about, generally when we do mindful parenting, all those sessions when we train them, so a lot of times we see our children, we also think that, we are very sure that what we think is good for them is what they want. So that is really the big challenge. So we need to really be open to listen to them. Deep listening is important. The more we listen to them, then the generations can understand each other with compassion. But most of the time, each generation, the older generation particularly, for example, I can tell, oh my God, I walked 6 miles barefoot to go to school. I didn't have slippers. Now you have everything, so why you're not studying? Because that doesn't have any meaning to them at all, because that's not what they see, how they see the world. So I think it's very important to be open and listening to both sides is a very important step. So most of the time, if we have a fixed view of thinking that this is the best way to think about it, that's going to really create more conflict because we're not open to being in a mindful space where we are open to listen to them. And so that way, the conversation, the dialogue is open, which is important. So where the compassion practices will be helpful. Loving kindness meditation we found improve social relationships, people feel much better connected to other people. It also improves their emotions, things like that. So if you go to my website, mindfuldignity.com, so I recorded all the guided meditations. You can download it, it's free. There's also journaling. If you don't like to meditate, you can also download it. All of them are there. So there is different meditations you can practice 15 minutes. So I think it's this is one way to really help us to cultivate it. Then of course practicing is the next one, how you go to real life. So deep listening is one thing that will be very helpful across generations to come. And also accept our children are not going to be as perfect as we are. The most, that's what we think, so we should say that. So the most, what we call the immigrant paradigm, people are in public health here. What we found was over generations, plus second, third generation, the health outcomes surprisingly goes down. That is, my grandchildren are more likely to have maybe prenatal baby, all those things, compared to myself. It's called epidemiological paradox in the literature. So I think we need to be really a lot more kind and compassionate to them to really help them to understand what's going on. And in the process, probably we can also understand their imperfections and accept them as they are. It's okay if my daughter doesn't go to Harvard. It would be nice, but she can go to Harvard. She wants to go to a school where she thinks it's important to her. And I think how to accept that because part of the being mindful is compassionate part. Thank you. I hope I've answered some aspect of the question. I may not have the right answers, but this is something I've been thinking of.
Yeah, understanding and actually practicing yourself. Actually, kids actually follow you. So if you do that, something like that, I've seen one example in when I was traveling in a bus, and a lady was reading a book, and then the small girl was also reading a book. Actually, normally you see the device in the hand, right, phone and all this. So the other passenger asked her, why this small girl is reading a book rather than having a phone in her hand. He said that she follows me. So she is reading the book, that's why the kid is reading the book. So you lead the example with the example. That's what I think.
We are running out of the time, so I think we'll take the last question before we take out for lunch.
Yes, so there will be only one last question for this panel discussion, and then we take a photograph after that, and then we break for the lunch.
Yeah. Please be short with the question.
Do we need water?
Please be short.
Good afternoon. Thank you. This is not going to be a question. My name is Majid Taj. My name is Majid Taj, and I'm actually representing the, as you mentioned, Indian American Muslim Council. Diversity, inclusion, and equity is really close to my heart, and that's why I'm here. And any support this organization needs, I'm here to extend my help. And again, I want to acknowledge and thank you for organizing this event here. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Keune and Dr. Mahalingam, for taking the valuable time to have the speech and the discussion in the forum and answering the question. Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for, especially for me as an outsider, allowing me to be in your presence and being talking about issues that are obviously very central to you. I very much appreciate it. So thank you very much.
We'll have a group photograph right now after this.
We're now going to be presenting plaques to Mr. Jon and Mr. Mahalingam.
Social work and something we discussed. Social work and psychology. School of Social Work, SSW. School of Social Work में है सर डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ साइकोलॉजी तेरी बिल्डिंग आसपास
Staff name to present a bouquet and annihilation of cast to Miss Smita Gandhi.
उधर भी जाओ, स्टेज पे जाओ। हाँ हाँ
Everyone, the last thing that we're going to do before we break off into to lunch is, while we're waiting for lunch to get here, we're going to be having a group photo up on stage. That's going to be taking a while, and everyone, please try not to be too unorganized when we do this. But before we break up into lunch, before we have all the cultural activities, we're going to decide to have a group photo of us all. So.
So guys, it is a time to take a group picture. So we know there is a lot of members here. So we are going to arrange little bit this table little bit move that side. And please come on the stage. All the people on the back stage, please come front. Again, we have the cultural program, full of cultural program with lot of dance, singing, speeches, presentation. So after lunch, make sure you guys will be here. Okay? So please come forward. Please be on the stage. We want everybody to pick. All the there are babysitters. Revan, there are babysitters. Can you please bring all the again guys, please come. We only have 5 minutes to take a group picture. So please, we'll have a social discussion. Please come on the stage. Again. Please. Please family, please come on the stage. Confident family, please come on the stage. And please, everyone who are on the corridor, please bring them on the stage. All the kids. So guys, there is a lot of here. So please. Guys, okay, please move on. Go. Again. Guys, please be on the stage. We only have 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes. So kids, please. Chalo. We have to make sure
This way. chair खाली the legs will be paid. Okay.
Guys, can you hear me? Say German! I cannot hear you. Say German! फिर से जोर से एक बार विषय का जाग उठना चाहिए. एक बार फिर से जय 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 अर्चना मात्रे
Ladies only.